Okay. Is it on now? Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me out there? In the cheap seats? I can't hear myself. I'm not used to that. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Winnetka Village Council regular meeting for August 6, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ask everybody to mute your cell phone or whatever other electronic devices you might have brought with. And I'll ask Rob to do a roll call for attendance.
Thank you. Trustee Apatow?
Here.
Trustee Orsic?
Here.
Trustee Dearborn? Here. Trustee Dahlman?
Here.
President Rintz?
Here. Trustee Dearborn has agreed to lead us in the pledge this evening.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item 3 to this evening is quorum check.
Thank you. The August 13th study session is canceled, and we're checking quorum for August 20th. Any conflicts? Good? All right. Thank you.
Okay, item 4 is public comment. This is the time of the evening when anybody who wishes to from the audience can come on up to the podium and share your thoughts on any items that are not on the agenda this evening. So would anybody like to speak this evening? Okay.
Over the years, I have come here and said that I wanted or needed to believe that the village and this council were acting in the best interests of all the residents, and were not following some sort of corrupt personal interests in their actions. I was an idiot. It is clear that I've been wrong. Over the last few years, this council and village have been involved in ongoing lies and deceptions. About 2000, the council discussed street and beaches and arrived at specific decisions on how they would be administered. Then, in about 2021, the police chief and community development director sent out emails that contained false statements and completely disregarded decisions made by prior councils. In the last few years, the village council has received photographs showing illegal encroachments in the public street ends near the lake. Despite village pursuing other encroachments elsewhere, it has turned a blind eye on these illegal takings of public land. Recently, in secret, the council decided to give away a public sidewalk. In 2000, the then council held several meetings about the sidewalk and ended with thoughtful consideration with the plan that it would be temporarily closed and its outcome would be reconsidered. Now, the current council just quietly met in secret and decided to give away the sidewalk for no real public benefit. Despite the village president's statement there were no secret meetings, emails from staff show that this statement was also a lie, and the sidewalk giveaway was in fact made in secret. Now the village has received clear documentation that the permits at 205 Sheridan are being violated, and that the permittee has unilaterally decided to make changes after being informed by the IDNR that they were required to submit permit modification. The village engineer has falsely said that these modifications were approved. They never were. There was no question. If the village was acting with honor, integrity, and treating all citizens equally, construction at 205 Sheridan would have been ordered stopped. As it is, rather than stopping the illegal construction, it appears the village solution here is to scare its citizens to keep them from seeing and documenting that illegal construction. It appears the village is operating under the belief that there can be no violation if no one reports one. So the Gestapo Lake Village Police issued a citation against me for entering a construction area. The village has no construction area ordinance, just a trespassing ordinance. Also, the village does not have the authority to assert trespassing to state public trust land. This citation is a mastery of deception, deceit, and misdirection. The village issued a citation that does not allege a violation of the underlying ordinance and forces me to waste my time and money going to court under the threat of arrest to defend myself against meritless charge. And I can't. I already missed one day of work in an environment and time where there is a shortage of anesthesiologists in this country and community, and my absence likely resulted in the lack of some provision of health care to people that needed it and had to have that care delayed. I cannot afford to treat my coworkers and my patients with the same contempt and corruption this village seems so ready to do. Instead, I am forced to agree not to enter public land in order for this meritless citation to be dropped. I think people in this village are justifiably be proud of its history as a pioneer in progressive education and progressive ideals in general, which valued all citizens equally, not just a select few. In 1965, Martin Luther came and spoke in Winnetka. I don't think that would happen today. 50 years from now, I think people will look back on this time and will hang their heads in shame when reflecting on the corruption, deceit, and misinformation perpetrated by a council and a village working in secret and ignoring the thoughtful and deliberative direction established by prior village leaders in their attempt to create a Winnetka oligarchy. Hopefully, these plans won't bear fruit. Unfortunately, while the real issue is those in leadership, the taint of this corruption and deceit infects all of those who are involved. Following orders is not a defense. Recently, a video aired showing a soldier speaking who said, "I decide what the law is and you're illegal." It seems that such a sentiment has become the foundation for the actions and beliefs of the village here. There is an old saying, "The fish stinks from the head down." While I believe that is true, it cannot be doubted that when the fish stinks, the entire fish stinks. And all of you share in the shame, honor, and corruption of this village and its Gestapo when you choose to remain silent.
Thank you for your kind words, Ted.
Thank you for your kind actions.
Would anybody else like to speak? Seeing none, I will close public comment and we'll move forward. Next item is reports. First is trustees. We'll start with Tina.
No report.
Bob? Rob?
No report tonight.
Bridget?
I have reports. So I went to the first RED meeting on July 16th, and it was very exciting. It actually was. It was long, and it was vigorous because they have extended an offer to a new executive director, Jason Rogers, and they've decided to also keep on a consultant for a period of time to make sure that the director gets up to speed so that the environment at RED is positive in the future. So that was good. And then I was at the farmer's market and I did not get a chance to write up anything, so I'll give a few highlights from the July 20th farmer's market. The biggest highlight was a couple of teenage boys that stopped by and liked the post office project. They said it looks lively and like a fun place to hang out, and that the new picture of one Winnetka, quote, speaks Winnetka. So they approved of that drawing. A gentleman that came last summer to ask that we have no left turn signs like Glencoe came back up again. And, you know, I was actually just in Glencoe today, and they do have no left turn into parking lot signs. He was kind of upset that it hadn't been addressed, even though he came last summer. And I think it's not a bad idea. I think you were there
I
at
heard
the
that
time.
too, yeah.
It's something for us to think about and talk about. He thinks that he lives nearby and thinks that there's been a lot of close calls with accidents. Somebody stopped by to say that Illinois State Park has a beach of the future. It's a state-of-the-art best practices place for the Great Lakes, and that they use little islands instead of breakwaters to not interfere with littoral drift, and that we should look into going up and checking out what they're doing up there. A ton of money and a big consortium of universities are involved in it. And then somebody brought up the IMEA issue, which I think has stricken a chord with a lot of people because I've been approached also in parking lots about that, and that the commitment is too long to go as far out in the future as we're talking about, and that there may not be a better answer, but we should have a community forum with a bunch of different people to talk about and learn more. So that is my report.
Great. Okay, village attorney.
No report tonight.
Village manager.
Just briefly, picking up off Trustee Orsick, we've been working on the community forum with IMEA, and we have a tentative date set for October 22nd. And we're working on the speaker list and the location with Patrick Hanley.
Is the format similar to what King?
I don't have those details yet.
Okay.
We're not organizing it,
Is
we're
it
participating in it.
open?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And once we have more details, we'll share it.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Rob. And village president, just one thing this evening. Yesterday, Rob, I, Jim Bernal, and a cast of thousands. Strand was there, Jody was there from Tesca, thank you. We went out to visit with our friends at IDOT out in Schaumburg to discuss Willow Road and also Green Bay Road. Painfully evident that current administration is doing a lot of things to make the state finances look better at the expense of local finances. And it is clear that the state's position in order to balance their budget has been to not do business the way they used to do it with respect to these jurisdictional transfers. And that used to be they fix it, hand it over, brand new condition, and then we take it from there. Now it's turned into a situation where we have to pursue multiple pots of funding and almost have them identified before we can get any traction. So at least we have our marching orders and understand what we have to do next, which is pretty important. I know Rob has been talking to Tim already, and we received some ideas. And many of these, interestingly enough, many of these applications are to the feds, so we have to basically apply jointly with IDOT. So I guess intergovernmental agreements are us. So we'll see where it goes from here, but at least we have some direction and some understanding of what the standards are downstate right now. And, you know, I'm unhappy about it, and I went in completely believing that we could change something, but this is policy coming from the Springfield Oval Office. So,
Quick questions. That's more IDOT. That won't impact the way they're doing business with us on stormwater or any other commitments they've made?
anything that, well, we haven't got any commitments from IDOT anyway on anything
But
as
it
far
was-
as funding.
I'm
but
thinking of Springfield in general. Is it leaking over into other groups, or is that?
I haven't seen it yet, but
No,
it's
I
hard to
haven't
say.
seen that.
Okay, great.
Although IDOT has a lot of permitting authority
Yeah.
with respect to projects that impact their roads.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it bleed over into other agencies.
So Chris, are you saying that the municipality is now responsible for the upgrade of the road? That,
Well, there's a middle ground. It's the game isn't the way it used to be played. Is really what it boils down to. There are limited funds. They establish a value for the roadway, which will clearly be not a value that is equal to actually rebuilding the entire strip. So they'll come up with their formula. We'll do a couple of studies that are required as part of the process, and then we'll come back to the table and find out what kind of money that they're talking about, and then we'll know what the gap is. And then we have to go out and start knocking on doors and seeing if we can find it.
okay, but they don't do the construction, the road construction.
They may, but it would be part of a
an
generalized
agreement.
agreement where we would cede authority over to them to do that.
Yeah, there's two paths you can execute. If you have the funding in place, you can execute the jurisdictional transfer prior to the project or after. Generally, if you want to build it to local standards, you'd want the jurisdictional transfer to occur before, so you can build it to a local standard. Otherwise, it's going to be built to a state standard.
And for those of you in the room that haven't been tracking this, as we all know, Hubbard Woods is in awful condition from a lot of perspectives. A lot of the infrastructure is bad. The physical improvements, the sidewalks, the trees, you name it, it just does not look like it should be here in Winnetka. We're trying to find a way that we can follow a path that the state used to have prescribed, which was, as I said before, they fix it and then we take it. They aren't doing that anymore, so now we have to figure out a new way. But the state of Illinois owns Green Bay Road through all of Winnetka. And in order for us to do some of the streetscape things that we would like to do, whether they're bump outs or mid-block crossings, if you remember, we talked about stop signs at a couple locations up there. None of that can happen as long as IDOT is the owner and the primary jurisdiction on that roadway. So, all right, well, that's my report for this evening, so we'll move forward. Item 6 is the establishment of the consent agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item from the consent agenda for a separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
That's a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. I'll now ask Rob to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the Village Council minutes for July 9th, 2024 study session and July 16, 2024 regular meeting. Approval of the warrant list dated June 28th, 2024 through July 11th, 2024 in the amount of $2,730,250. Resolution number R62, 2024, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Regional Emergency Dispatch Center for the attachment and operation of a public safety's communication equipment. Resolution number R63, 2024, approving a contract with Wesco Distribution Incorporated for the purchase of 15 kV underground cable. And resolution number R64, 2024, approving an easement agreement for the installation and maintenance of utilities, 1321 Willow Road, Duke Childs Field, for adoption.
Great. Thanks, Rob. All right, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved.
And second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Apitoff?
Yes.
Trustee Orsick?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
That motion carries. Thank you. All right, item 8 this evening, under ordinances and resolutions. A, ordinance number MC 08-2024, amending the Winnetka Code as amended to adopt additions of various International Code Council codes and National Fire Protection Association codes standards. Tonight, council will consider amending the various building, fire, and safety codes in an effort to make them as current as possible. And Community Development Director David Schoen will walk us through it.
Yep.
And Rob's got his finger
Yeah,
up.
just real quick, council, there are PowerPoint handouts at your seats.
Thank you.
In the order of the presentation. So, go ahead, David.
Yeah. So, starting on page 2. So, good evening. Over the last several months, village staff, along with the staff from Safe Build, who provides us with plan review and inspection services, have been reviewing the model codes for our adoption, and I want to personally thank 2 people from my department, Dvorka Karinzik and Mark Opels. They did the bulk of the work in terms of reviewing the codes and identifying the amendments for your consideration this evening, and then also John and his staff, in particular Tom Hutchinson, for their review of the fire-related codes. So this evening, we have for your consideration the adoption of 8 model codes from the International Code Council. They are the same codes we've adopted in the past as a village. We're just adopting newer versions of them, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then in addition to that, there are 8 model codes that we're adopting from the National Fire Protection Association. Again, all of those we have adopted in the past, older versions, except one. There's a new one we're adopting, and that's standard for installation of stationary energy storage systems. We're seeing more and more properties installing large energy storage systems in their homes, and so we're looking for some standards to follow when reviewing permits for such items. In addition to these 16 model codes, there are also some state codes that we must follow that relate to development. Those are the Illinois Energy Conservation Code, the Illinois State Plumbing Code, and the Illinois Accessibility Code. We can adopt local amendments to those codes, but they can only be more strict. They can't be more lenient. So why does the village adopt more current codes? So the International Code Council and NFPA, they have cycles of reviewing the codes to identify where changes may be. Some deal with incremental improvements to safeguard health, safety, and welfare of building occupants, but also to consider the use of new construction materials and methods. The ICC, for instance, they publish a new model code every 3 years. And we're looking to adopt a new code every 6 years, which is a common practice by municipalities. A couple of other reasons we adopt more current codes is that insurance rates are partially based upon the Insurance Services Office, or ISO, ratings, which are based upon, in part, what editions of model codes you're using. We recently went through that process, and given where we are in the timing of adoption, we received lower ratings than we hoped to had received, given the age of our model codes. With the adoption of these new codes, we can go back to ISO, have them reconsider our rating, and have it adjusted accordingly. And then also, the state of Illinois adopted a new law requiring municipalities to have a baseline set of codes adopted when it comes to structural design of new buildings. It's basically if your code can't be more than 6 to 9 years old compared to this baseline code. And so the state has provided an incentive for communities to adopt more current model codes. In the packet that you received, we provided a table of what nearby communities have adopted in terms of model codes and what series they are. Communities are all at different stages of which code they have and where they're at adopting new codes. A recent example is Wilmette. Just recently replaced the 2006 ICC codes with the 2018 code series. So again, if you have any questions, we provided you with that table of what our what the nearby communities have. With the ordinance before you, we are amending 3 different chapters of the code. Security and fire detection systems, the section that adopts the general, predominantly ICC codes, and then the chapter that adopts and amends primarily fire prevention and life safety codes. The ordinance amendments seem significant. There's a number of pages there. A lot of those fall into what I would call administrative amendments. So the code has places where the community has to identify the community, who it is, what department or agency will be responsible for enforcing the code, what is your appeal process locally. And so a lot of those amendments set it up for our particular circumstances. Also, the model codes will reference other model codes. And so we have to make amendments to state that instead of the International Plumbing Code, we are going to follow the Illinois Plumbing Code. Instead of the International Accessibility Code, we're going to follow the Illinois Accessibility Code. So a lot of those amendments deal with those issues where we have to clarify what other codes we're using rather than those of the ICC. And then the last I would call are more technical or policy amendments. The document you have before you, we've just identified amendments we're making to what we adopted in 2019 when we adopted the 2015 code. And those are identified by underlined or struck through. So just briefly go over some of the amendments. This box here, those are all the codes you're adopting this evening. It may seem like a lot, but a couple of things, like with the International Building Code, which applies to multifamily, commercial, and institutional uses, depending upon how you're going to construct the building, will then determine what are the requirements. So whether it's the materials or methods of how you're going to construct, it identifies specific approaches. Also, there's a lot in these codes that deal with commercial and industrial uses that we don't deal with in Winnetka. Other communities may use those sections of the code, but we don't have that sort of base to it. High-rise structures or industrial plants there are sections of the codes in there, and then so there's, it seems like a lot, but it all depends upon each community in terms of which portions you will actually use. So in terms of local amendments to the International Building Code and the International Residential Code, we identified a few in the staff report. The most significant being is how we recommend that the council treats 1 and 2 family dwelling automatic sprinkler requirements. Up until this evening, the village has adopted local amendments to the International Residential Code that provided an option for those who chose not to install fire sprinklers. So The requirement is you need to install them unless you do these other things. Most builders and homeowners in the community have chosen to do the other things, many of which are standard in our community, given already the quality of construction that we see in our community. But it looks at more robust building materials and assemblies to slow the spread of fire. However, providing this option has become a safety concern as the model codes continue to be are written as a package, and some requirements in the IRC are reduced to the expectation that fire sprinklers are going to be installed, because that's part of the overall package of the code. So with the 2021 code series that we're adopting, staff recommends that the village no longer provide the option to installing sprinklers. And in your packet, there is a separate memo highlighting the benefits of taking this approach. Also, there's a table in there showing the status of where other communities, most communities in the metro area, already or are considering adopting the requirement, and that information is included in your packet. So the requirement for automatic sprinkler systems in the code as written, it only applies to new homes. In the IRC, it does not apply to additions or alterations. So we'd be making no adjustments to that. That's the standard language in the IRC. However, we do recommend with residential additions or alterations that we continue to maintain the local amendment that requires certain construction materials to help slow the spread of fire. In addition, we're proposing one amendment to the Illinois Plumbing Code, and that is a PVC pipe that can easily crack after usage in certain situations, and so we are proposing that it be removed as an allowed material in the code. The National Electric Code, some highlights have to do with this may not interest you, so I'm not going to go into it. In terms of standards for emergency disconnects and the current ratings. Have I lost you yet, other than Chris? One thing that we may understand more easily is that they're always looking at ways to reduce the use of extension cords, particularly in a kitchen setting. So there has been an adjustment with islands and peninsulas in kitchens in terms of the spacing of receptacles, outlets in the kitchen. A couple of local amendments that we're proposing have to do with sump pump and ejector pumps. Currently, the NEC requires a GFCI receptacle in order to keep basements from flooding. We're proposing, and other communities in the area have done this, is that you can have a non-GFCI simplex receptacle in the basement near the devices, but it has to be clearly labeled as such. So that's one local amendment. And then the other thing we're seeing is that more and more with the addition of EV chargers or whatever, more and more electronic devices that we have, that we will require a minimum 40 position panel for new single-family homes, and some of this we're already seeing in the installation of homes. The property maintenance code remains basically the same. Just want to remind the council, it applies to both residential and non-residential properties in the community. At one point, it only applied to non-residential. The code specifically states that it is, enforcement is based on a complaint-driven basis. And then one particular item that we have maintained is when its paint is purely peeling and flaking, that would not be a code violation. When it gets down to the material underneath, like the wood being exposed, then that becomes a code violation because we want to maintain the condition of the underlying material. And then a few highlights from the Fire Prevention and Life Safety Code amendments. The International Fire Code now has some language regarding food trucks. That's why we've eliminated the food truck language in the proposed ordinance. The IFC also now has some language regarding the use of LP gas in commercial food service vehicles, the appliance in those vehicles. So we've taken out our local amendments. And then last item, and we can, John and I can elaborate on it more if you have questions on the fire sprinklers, is establishing audio and visual alarm requirements for sprinkler systems. And the purpose of this is if there's a leak in the home and there's water flow within the pipes, that then these alarms will go off. So, for instance, if you happen not to be home, at least the neighbor will be notified that something's going on, can reach out to the village. So that was one thing we thought we could add with the addition of the automatic fire sprinkler requirement. And then lastly, as the ordinance is currently written, it will go into effect 60 days after its passage. That will provide us time to get the word out in terms of the new codes that we would be using when reviewing building permits. And with that, John and I would be happy to answer questions you may have on the proposed ordinance.
Any questions for David or Chief Ripka?
So David, on the sprinklers, I mean, I read the fire safety portion of this, and they seem to obviously make sense. Other communities are adopting them, so I think that sounds good. However, you know, I thought the statistic over the last 8 or 9 years, only 5% of new construction in the village has adopted, has opted to put the sprinkler systems in. So basically, they've said, we don't want to pay the money to that, because who would object to it otherwise? Can you provide some context on what this means from a cost standpoint for let's say a 5,000 square foot home? What does this cost to put in? And in the last point about the audio and visual alarm requirements, what is that that has not been in place, that has not been a requirement for the sprinklers to date? What does that add to the cost of this?
So the cost for the sprinkler system, in researching the memo that I put together, there's, you can go to all entities online and try to find the data of the cost per square foot. So construction costs are drastically increased in the last, weeks, months, years, of course. So the data that I put in the memo was probably slightly outdated. That's the best the data I could find. I didn't want to obviously make it up. So in talking to other builders, it's probably low. I would say, I think I put in there in the memo that was at roughly $1.61 per square foot. It's probably between 2 and 3. There, people probably have a better idea than that. So I would guess the 8,000 square foot example that was in there was I think I said roughly $12,000 on the cost of an 8,000 square foot home. It's probably more in line with 20 to 30,000 based on newer data received since I put that memo out. And the cost for the outside horn strobe device, I would guess a couple $100.
Okay.
They're all required on commercial buildings now. Anytime you have a sprinkler system, it's an activation. goes over, for our response to a commercial building, it goes over our response where the FTC connection is. And in residential, the main purpose of it is just if a resident's not home and there would be a break in a pipe or an activation from a fire, and they're not connected to a fire alarm system, it would at least activate outside to let neighbors or somebody know, make some sort of notification. They would typically call us to respond, to come investigate the alarm that's activated, and then we would know that there's something happening inside the home when, versus it running for an extended period of time without, no one really knowing.
And part of the fire safety is the safety of the neighbors in the neighborhood, correct? I mean, there were statistics in there I thought you included. It's not just for the residents of the property. There is a broader public safety benefit to this.
Sure, I mean, the main design of a residential system, it's not as robust as a commercial system, right? They're not required to be put in closets, for example, where a commercial system it would be. So the main design of a residential system is to protect the passageway so occupants can escape. And it also protects the firefighters that are responding in, right? Because we're going in the main paths of travel to get to where the fire is. And then obviously anytime you could keep the fire in check so it's not, getting into, concealed spaces, and that's where you would get into it could potentially spread to other buildings next door, right? If you have a house that's fully involved, there's going to be impact on neighbors on either side.
Okay. It's expensive. I mean, you should probably see that, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I would say 60% of the municipalities in Illinois that we build in require it.
Okay.
It's about 20 to 30,000. I will say, though, it is interesting because I think, and I can't remember if you provided this data or somebody else mentioned it, I think when people are electing in Winnetka to, not spec builders, right? So not the builders who are, buying the house and tearing it down. I think that's where we haven't seen a really large take rate of the residential sprinkling systems, because that cuts into the developer's spec profit. But I think the numbers show that when it's a person who is buying the property, bringing in an architect, and, they're a larger floor plan, and I can't remember if it's like 3,000 to 5,000 square feet, I think the vast majority of those homes are electing to have the fire suppression systems. So, yeah, there we go.
10 out of 183.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good idea. Don't-
I've expressed my concerns. I think one of the biggest issues we see as a home builder is that there has to be the education of the homeowners to know that they have to flush the system. So within 5 to 10 years, I typically will get a damage claim from one of our past home buyers insurance company. And 9 times out of 10, probably almost 100% of the time, it's because the homeowners haven't properly flushed their systems. So there is some ongoing maintenance that I think once it becomes more common. But, maybe this will encourage people not to tear down homes, and maybe this will encourage people to, continue to rehab existing structures. I don't know. But I'm in support of it. I mean, I've expressed my concerns about the cost, but I think we found a nice balance with new construction. And it seems to be a small percentage of the new construction budget.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it, yeah.
I have friends that were considering it, and they were leery, and I think it's good, it's smart, I'd put it in mine. I think there are some that are leery because they've had friends that have had, something gets tapped by accident, knocked into it, and it goes. And they're leery about putting water in their, over all their furniture and the rooms that might get accidentally triggered. And I think there's an education, as you said, there's an education process that needs to happen. But if you're going to invest in a 5,000 square foot home in this community, I would think that kind of makes sense, especially if it's health, safety, and welfare of your people in your home. Just 2 other things on things. The PVC, I hate to get specific, but the PVC piping, you're recommending against that? Is that
Well, it's a specific PC.
in a specific area, or is that anywhere?
Yeah, in a specific use.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, it's
that's fine.
not PV in general.
In general, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, good.
I would also say, just because I express the same concerns, I think that when I see warranty complaints or insurance claims to us as a builder, it's for the systems that were built 20 to 15 years ago. I think the newer systems are better, and they're not, they don't have as much water flow. So, the concept of, going to a hotel and hanging your dress or
Right.
something on the thing, and
Exactly.
it doesn't happen as much. I think
Yeah.
the systems are a little bit, are more sophisticated, because we talked about that.
Yeah, the residential, NFPA 13D, which covers 1 and 2 family resident installation, I mean, we're adopting the newest model of that code, which covers how they're installed. And I think it's come a long way in the last, they've been putting these in houses for 20, 30 years now. And where they've come over the last 20, 30 years is drastically changed.
Sure.
There's, of course, the education component, there's different, insulation way to protect it from freezing, that sort of thing. And we are working on, like I said, the outside horn strobe. There were some options with advanced metering. I've been talking to the water and electric department where there can be notification should there be a flow within the house to notify a resident either on their phone through the meter, or, like I said, through the horn strobe, to have the fire department respond. So there's ways to notify residents if there's a leak in the water system.
Is it an all or nothing thing? I mean, I guess I look at this and say, I really don't want it in my living room, but I do want it on my stairs, coming down from the bedrooms, the corridors, to make sure people can get out of the house. Or is it everything you gotta do, every room, every?
Again, 1 and 2 family residents are different than a multifamily construction or commercial.
Right.
There's a lot less that are involved, and the piping's much smaller too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the 13D tells you, where they are required.
Okay.
Like I said, it's much less than you would see in a what you would typically see like in here and stuff. But
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Others? All right, we can open it up for public comment. Would anybody like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, we'll bring it back up.
One more question, David. For the renovations and additions and so on, heretofore, we have not imposed a sprinkler or higher building material mandate.
Up to this point, we have imposed the higher material mandate, so that's staying the same, so we're keeping that.
So nothing changes for renovations.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Good discussion. Let's see where we're at. Hold on here. Okay, may I have a motion? Help me understand this. Let's say there was a note here about 60 days.
Yeah, that's already built in. It's already built in.
So is this?
This is introduction.
So it's 60 days after we adopt, or?
Correct.
So this is introduction.
Oh, so we wouldn't go introduction and adoption this evening? Okay.
We thought it was appropriate to do introduction and then adoption underneath and 60 days.
Gotcha. Okay, may I have a motion to adopt resolution number, I must have lost myself here. Helps to be on the right page, folks. Here it is, right? Okay, may I have a motion to introduce ordinance number MCO 8/2024?
So moved.
Second.
That's a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thanks, guys. All right, item B this evening, resolution number R 65/2024, awarding a contract for sanitary sewer evaluation study. This is up for adoption. The village has conducted numerous studies in the last few years to investigate our sanitary sewer system. Tonight, council will consider a proposal recommended by village staff to complete the sanitary sewer studies. And our assistant village engineer, Obaid Khalid, is here tonight to review. Take it away.
Thank you, President Renz. Good evening, village trustees. Today, I'm here to present the sanitary sewer evaluation study. I hope everyone have a copy of my presentation. We do have also some extra copies for audience in the back if somebody needed. So, starting from page number 2, I would like to start with the brief background of the project. As you may already aware or know that village maintains a separate collection system for sanitary and stormwater, And under the watershed management ordinance, village requires to reduce or eliminate the source of inflow and infiltration in the sanitary system, which is also commonly known as INI. Typically, the sanitary sewer systems are designed and sized for interior building waste only, and they are not intended to accept the large amount of stormwater into the sanitary system. Any inflow and infiltration of the stormwater into the sanitary system can overwhelm the system and cause the issues like basement backups, sewer overflows, flooding, and lift station capacity issues kind of things. So other than that, other than the general maintenance of the sanitary sewer system, the village is committed to identify the sources of INI and eliminate them from our system to maintain the effectiveness of the sanitary sewer system and reduce the risk of residential basement backup issues. On slide number 3, you can see the overall map of our sanitary sewer system, or the bigger map which we provided with the presentation. In the past, village has conducted 3 investigation studies to identify and eliminate the INI sources, and the study conducted in 2013, 17, and 2019. And you can see the areas of those studies in the map with the blue and the yellow colors. The village now desire to perform the study of the remaining uninvestigated areas shown red on this map, which is mainly the northeast and northwest section of the town. The red dots representing the sanitary manhole on the map, and the manholes in the northeast section, which you see in the gray, they are already investigated in the previous study. So that's why those are not the part of this study. With the completion of the study, it will complete the village commitment to investigate its entire sanitary sewer system. So with slide number 4, let's talk about some general scope of the study and what's included. As I mentioned before, the proposed study will evaluate the existing condition of the sanitary system, identify the defects and INI sources, and after all the data collection and the analysis, the study will propose the remediations of the problems and provide recommendation to improve the overall system. So if you see the picture on the slide 4, which illustrates all the possible INI sources, the one in the blue are considered infiltration sources, such like cracks in the sewers, cracks in the manholes, private service issues like broken service, faulty connections, and tree roots, etc. The ones showing in greenish color are considered inflow sources, like cross connections of a storm sewer from public storm or from private services, such that downspouts connections. So the goal of this study is to identify all of those sources, and in order to do that, the process will include the manhole investigation, sewer televising of the mains, smoke testing of the mains, and the tide water testing if needed. So let me walk you through a really quick what's included in those process, or what they are going to do in those investigations. So on slide 5, with the manhole investigation, they are going to inspect the interior and exterior of the manholes to identify the defects, potential sources of INI, and overall structural integrity of the manhole structure. And based on the observations, recommendation will be made to rehabilitate the manhole deficiencies. On slide 6, in a smoke testing, They are going to introduce a non-toxic smoke into the sewer main to locate the INI sources, such as downspouts connection, foundation drains, and the stormwater connections. Basically, it is the observation of where the smoke is coming out. That's where the water can get in. So they are identify the sources by that way. And then also, they will going to characterize the identified sources, whether they are public or private, and recommend and provide recommendations how to eliminate that from the system. On slide 7, in sewer televising, we will be used to evaluate the condition of the sewer mains, which identify the defects in the mains and the service laterals, such as cracks and fault connections. And based on the observations, defect will be characterized into the priorities like high, medium, low, so the village can address them accordingly. On slide 8, dye water testing. So dye water testing is just a follow-up inspection to pinpoint and quantify the cross connection, which are not clearly identified during the smoke testing. Basically, they introduce a non-toxic organic material into the drains, which was not identified in the smoke testing to identify either they connect on the storm sewer or the sanitary main. So based on the previous study, it may not need it for our system, but it can be performed on a as needed basis if they need it. So on slide 9, you can see the overall schedule of the project. You can see the study will take the rest of 2024 and extend into 2025 to complete. The study will complete in July 2025, and its finding and recommendations will be presented to Village Council. Let's talk about the budget on slide number 10. Village approved 2024 budget includes $200,000 in sewer fund for this study, and also village plan to include $100,000 in 2025 budget, which is also already included as a part of 5-year capital program of sanitary sewer for this study. So with that, the overall budget of the study will be $300,000 over the 2-year period time. So on June 21st, we requested 6 professional engineering firms to provide the proposal for the proposed study, and received 3 proposals as listed in the table, which you can see on slide 11. Staff review and evaluate each proposal and rank using a scale of 1 to 10 for the factors including project understanding, project approach, firm experience, and the project team experience. So in the table on slide 11, showing the average total review score for each proposal, and based on that, RJN Group received the highest score. So after reviewing each firm based on its qualification, the fee proposal from each firm are compared, and you can see on slide 12 that RJN has the most favorable proposal with the highest review score and the lowest proposal fee. RJN also successfully performed the village sewer study in 2017, and they also work with other communities like Wilmette, Deerfield, and Northfield, etc. In overall, RJN Group has over 41 years of experience in sewer studies, and they are considered one of the expert and specialized firm in sewer studies and INI investigations. So with that, staff is recommending the council to consider adopting the resolution to award the contract to the RJN Group with the amount not to exceed $297,622.60, which will be paid in 2 fiscal years, 2024 and 2025. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Obed?
Well, this may be more of a policy discussion, but I'm looking at slide 6 and wondering what happens when smoke comes up through somebody's window well. Based on our experience with other tests, and we realize that a problem, a cross connection or I&I is on private property. How do we handle that? But that's,
So
and how, I guess, because we've got good experience with that.
yeah, so we did 3 studies, and we after the study is complete, they provide the recommendation and the finding, and the study will be presented to the council, and based on that we come up with the different programs to fix all the issues. The issue you are referring, if they identify the cross connection from the resident, which yes, in past study those are identified. So we usually work with the resident to share that what are the findings and what we find out, and then we communicate with them that if it needs to be disconnected, what the step they need to take in to do that. So we in the past it is not in the large number of houses that's come up. So just for the example, like in 2017 study, actually 2013 study, only 25 or 30 homes were identified that they have the cross connections. And out of that, I think by now, most of them already disconnected and eliminate those cross connections.
Many of the troubles that we ran into were downspouts
Yeah.
being connected.
That's what I was thinking. But I'm kind of surprised because I'm just, always looking at how it affects me. More importantly, back to me. I'm looking at Forest Glen, and we had our street, and our water main and storm completely rebuilt. So I was kind of surprised to see that that wasn't done at that time.
So, and Obed can provide a little more context, but a lot of our work is sewer lining and rebuilding of the manholes. It can also be relined. Sometimes the chimney stack might need a little rehab, but
Yeah.
less invasive.
Yeah,
So that's usually our approach.
okay.
Yes.
So is the concern, I mean, I was thinking when they connect sanitary into a storm, which was, it's polluting our lakes because it's flowing into the lakes, that was,
Or to the west as
or
well.
to the west, either way. And there was only 20,
But that's so.
I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean, somebody's cross-connecting it, somebody did it.
So the cross connection we are talking about in this study is the storm sewer cross connection into the sanitary. There
Putting
is
more
no
water.
sanitary cross connection into the storm sewer.
Right. I mean, we've been kind of focused, I think, on people that are doing the wrong thing or taking somebody took a shortcut and said, I'm just going to put it in the storm sewer. You're more worried about storm sewers being connected into sanitary?
Yes.
Because
Okay.
that's what causes your
The blow up,
sanitary
yeah.
to back up.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Because
yeah.
because
If you get too much
sanitary
water.
system
Much
are not designed to take the storm water and
No question about it. And I'm still trying to figure out the root cause of all this stuff, which is somebody had to do it. And how we.
Sometimes it's a
Well, it
mistake.
used to
Some-
be legal, too.
yeah. So
30, yeah.
Yeah.
so especially in the
Yeah.
past with the old homes, there was a trend where they just installed one service and connecting everything into it and then connect to the sanitary. So those are the ones which we are trying to identify.
And so if the smoke comes up like the Vatican,
Yeah.
I guess my question is, homeowners responsible for paying?
for private property.
For private
if
property,
it's
yeah.
in private property, yes.
But, I mean, you would
Yeah.
think that they
No, they
probably
should.
had problems over time with
Possible.
backups. so maybe they're happy
No,
to
I
get
think it's,
that.
I agree. I mean, I think they
Yeah.
should take
Yeah.
responsibility.
Well, Brad, what is the, so aside from the cross connections of residents, what has been the liability that's come out of these studies for the village? So ultimately, so this is an operating expense going through the sanitary sewer fund. You're gonna come back in June and say the village has to put capital of X dollars to repair whatever, is that what we're?
Yeah, so village already is committing to put $600,000 for the program, which is split into the different categories like the sewer lining, manhole lining, and etc. And we able to successfully address all the issues that identify in 3 studies, and some are the cracks in the village mains, some are a really bad public owned or village owned manhole. So we, after the study, we try to come up with the program, like how much we want to spend on the manholes, how much we want to spend on the sewer line, which we already committed. And that is why this study also prioritize the stuff for us, that this is like a manholes or the sewer main require more attention as compared to medium priority sections and the low priority sections.
So I don't recall the capital spending program for the sanitary sewer, but do we have a placeholder in
Yeah.
here for this?
Yeah.
Is that the 600,000?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do have.
Yeah, so we,
So coming out of this study, we're assuming 600,000 village liability
Village
No.
already committing,
annually.
yeah.
Annually.
So
So
not
this is a,
specific
this
to
is a,
this study.
not, we don't know the results of the study yet, but what we've loaded in since 2013 has been a pay-as-you-go. Initially, I think 13, 14, 15, there was a higher investment because we were behind and there was a lot of things that needed to be fixed. It seems a little bit random when you look at the map, but based upon surveys of flooding problems, we focused on the properties that had the most incidents of basement backups.
Yeah.
And we worked on those as the high priorities first, and then scaled it into a more pay-as-you-go at about $600,000 a year.
But-
And the rates are tied to that spend.
Okay, so the 600,000, when we look at the budget,
Mhm.
this coming year's
You'll look at,
capital-
you'll look at what's in for '25, and then you'll look the next 4 years out as well. You'll see a programmed expense.
But some of that 25 budget item for capital is intended to cover some of this.
Some of
Whatever
it
might come
perhaps,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then whatever's left to be cleaned up from other areas that we're still working on.
And it's paid for not from general fund,
No,
but from
it's-
fees.
It's fees,
enterprise.
it's a utility fund.
Right, it's a utility fund.
And does this test, I know we're talking stormwater into sanitary, does this test catch them both when you do smoke? You'll see the people that are connecting illegally? in
You're gonna
sanit-
catch some illegal
Yeah,
connections.
we
Sure.
will
I mean
catch it.
sanitary into stormwater, which is
Yeah,
polluting.
but which is very rare. I think in past 3 studies,
But
we
it-
were not
but the
able.
test will catch both?
Yes, test
Okay,
will catch.
that's
The
great.
smoke testing will catch
That's
any
great.
cross connections.
Perfect.
Okay, would anybody from the audience like to speak on this evening? Seeing none, we will bring it back up here. Any last thoughts or comments?
Nope. Good to go.
Okay.
I'm just glad we're completing it, the study.
It's been a long
ride.
time.
Yeah, I mean, like, when you look at how we're going, you know, we last did it in 2019, it was very small, right? 11,000 linear feet, and now we're jumping to 141,000. That's like, let's just get it done, right?
Mhm.
The one reason is you see the less linear footage in 2019 because we did a lot of manholes in that study.
Ah,
So that's
that-
how we balancing out.
Thank you for
Yep.
explaining that.
Okay. May I have a motion to adopt resolution number R 65-2024?
So moved.
Second?
That's a roll call vote?
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Orsick?
Yes.
Trustee Apatow?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Okay, item 9, old business, none. Item 10, new business. Item A is the review of the special use process. The village attorney and village staff has summarized the village's process and the various roles of the advisory bodies and village council given the public comment regarding proposed improvements to Centennial Park and Beach. we really want everybody in the community to understand the process and what the appropriate places to come and register your concerns are along the way. People are having a difficult time understanding the multi-stage approval process that we have. So I think Peter is going to walk us through this tonight. Oh, it says the village attorney, and, okay. You expect me to read all the way to the bottom of the page? I skim, you know? Okay. David will be here to walk us through this. Thanks, David.
Sure. So on page 1, just the cover page, tonight we're only reviewing the zoning entitlement process. We will not be reviewing the substance of the Park District's zoning relief application. The reason why we're having this presentation is given all the comments that have been made from members of the public about this process. We just want them to understand what is the council's purview and what is the process. So we're happy to answer any questions on the process, but any questions you have on the specifics of the proposed development should wait until the actual application is before the village council. So moving on to slide 2. I just want to review who can apply for zoning relief. So as council members know, the Winnetka Park District is a separate governmental entity from the village. It's its own entity. The Park District Board makes all decisions regarding the Park District's use of its own land, such as Centennial Park. The use of the land, however, must be consistent with the village's zoning regulations. The Park District, as with any property owner in the village, has the right to request any zoning relief that is allowed by the zoning ordinance, such as approval of special uses and zoning variations. Once a property owner submits a zoning relief application, the village has the obligation to process the application according to the rules of procedures established in the village zoning ordinance. The Park District has decided to proceed, as the property owner, to proceed with Centennial Beach and Park project separate from Elder Lane Beach and Park project. This is allowed given Centennial Park is a separate legal parcel from Elder Lane Park. On to page 3. In Winnetka, a park or recreational facility is an allowed special use within any zoning district within the village. A new facility or a major change to such a facility requires approval of the special use by the village council, but not before the village council receives recommendations from its advisory bodies. In this instance, it'll be the Plan Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Design Review Board. Each advisory body will hold a public hearing on the request after the proper notices are provided. At the public hearing, the applicant presents its case in support of its request, and interested persons are provided an opportunity to provide comments and testimony regarding the requested relief. The Park District has submitted a zoning relief application. They have also submitted revised materials in response to staff's comments on previous submittals. It is not unusual for a special use request involving site improvements to require multiple reviews by staff before it is ready to be considered by the advisory bodies. Turning to the next slide, 4. This table summarizes the role of village staff, the advisory bodies, and village council in the various aspects of the village approval process. If it was not for the requested zoning relief, Staff would be able to review and approve the project administratively if the applicant is able to demonstrate that the proposed improvements comply with all applicable building and site improvement codes, including the recently adopted lakefront construction and steep slope regulations. When a project requires zoning relief, staff will conduct, I'm turning to page 5. When a project requires zoning relief, staff will conduct a preliminary review of the project for code compliance to determine if the development should be able to, in general terms, comply with the administrative code requirements. Detailed construction plans are not required, but sufficient information must be submitted to staff so staff can determine if the proposed layout can be achieved and should be able to comply with village code requirements. If after review by staff and the council, the zoning relief is granted, and during the building permit process, an applicant changes the design of the project for some technical requirement, and it results in a major change, as defined in our special use section of the code, the applicant would need to go back through the full special use permit process again prior to staff being able to issue the building permit for the change proposed by the applicant. Moving on to page 6. During the zoning entitlement process, the village advisory bodies determine if the requested relief is consistent with the applicable village code standards. In the staff report to the council, we have provided a copy of those applicable standards. The advisory board's review is based upon these broad standards and not based upon review of technical code requirements, which is administratively handled by staff. So here's where the next set of slides have been provided for reference if we need to refer to them. This slide that we're on page 6 contains the special use standards that the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals will consider when reviewing the special use. Then on page 7, the slide contains the variation standards used by the Zoning Board. Some of these standards have similar aspects as special use standards, but also contain standards that look at the potential uniqueness of the property and the proposed improvements to determine whether a variation is warranted from the general village zoning requirements. Excuse me. On page 8 are the standards that the council is to consider when reviewing a variation. And as you can see, these standards are even more broad than what is used for the special use standards or the variation standards by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Slide 9 contains the findings of facts that the Design Review Board must reach in making its formal recommendation on the physical appearance of the proposed improvements. And then on slide 10 are the steep slope exceptions. Excuse me. If a development requires a special use permit, such as the Park District's application, and it includes construction activity does not comply with the requirements of the steep slope regulations, the village council may grant exceptions to the regulations as part of granting a special use permit. So when considering those exceptions rather than the variation standards, the Plan Commission and ZBA will consider the special use standards because these exceptions are part of the special use request. The next couple of slides, starting on slide 11, include the criteria that staff uses to administratively review and enforce the requirements of the lakefront construction ordinance as well as the steep slope ordinance. And those, as I said, are listed on slide 11 and 12. Slide 13, as I mentioned earlier, if during the permit process, for some reason, in order to construct the improvement, the applicant needs to make a significant change to the design, and it meets, if it's not considered a minor change, it's a major change, and the change requires going back through the special use process, thank you, as an amendment to the approved special use. And then on slide 14, the last slide, with our zoning entitlement process, it is the applicant that is required to submit all the necessary documentation in support of its application. The village staff will review it, and then the advisory bodies and village council will review the applicable documentation, and then make their respective determinations. The village does not undertake independent studies, but rather evaluates required information submitted by the applicant. So that's an overview of our process, the role of staff, the advisory bodies and the village councils in the different review components. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for David?
I guess I'll start, David.
Oh, I didn't mean to.
Huh?
Nothing.
And I think this is a great session to have so that everyone's on the same page. I think it's good for the applicant to make sure that everyone's thinking the same way of this process. So this is really good. I will say that I'm a little confused because I think there's maybe some contradictory language within here as it relates to the new lakefront ordinances and how they're applied and how they're dealt with or not dealt with at the lower commission levels and the village council. I'll give you, for instance, on page 159, it says here, talking about each advisory body will review the application based upon the applicable standards, blah, blah. Their review is based upon these broad standards and not based upon a review of technical code requirements for such items as the village's stormwater, building code, lakefront construction approval, steep slope regulation, so on and so forth. So there, it seems to say that zoning and plan would not take into account provisions of those lakefront ordinances. But when you go back over to the prior page, 158, it says during the zoning entitlement process, the village advisory boards determine if the requested relief is consistent with the applicable village code standards. They might identify changes and so on. And then when you go down below to the matrix, it says that steep slope zoning exceptions are included at zoning, plan commission, village council. So and then when you go to the specifics in the back of what each commission is looking at, each zoning board or whatever, when you talk about the health, welfare, and safety, which is obviously a core element of those ordinances, they have to meet that criteria. So how could they do that without looking at those ordinances? So I don't really know right now if zoning and plan commission will have those ordinances, and that will be part of their deliberation, and their findings, and they will opine on this, will come up to us, and we'll get the benefit of their vetting of that, or they don't include the steep slope ordinance or the lakefront construction ordinance in their review. I don't really know at this point.
Okay, and sorry for the confusion. That happened. they are not going to review the technical requirements of those ordinances. When the Plan Commission, well, it would have been the Plan Development Commission reviewed the One Winnetka project. We didn't give them a copy of the Stormwater Management Ordinance. We didn't give them a copy of all the building codes. It's assumed they're going to have to meet all of those code requirements that the village has established for those projects. Now, that doesn't mean under these broad standards, they're not going to comment on the design of the project from those standards perspectives. But whether a particular walkway is meeting the engineering standards for being constructed in a steep slope zone, that is an administrative function that will be performed. How someone will construct a still breakwater, that's an administrative function. Now, how they look at the design of those elements, they can review and comment on based upon their general standards, but we're not asking them to determine, is this the proper vegetation to put on a steep slope?
Can I interject, Bob? And this one I'm a little confused. I get One Winnetka, but this is uncharted water for all these committees, including us as a village council on the lake. And it's very different. So I'm just concerned that we're looking at it from the same standards as a walkway. I mean, to me, if I'm on the Plan Commission, I'm trying to look at this and understand, okay, minimally necessary, what am I looking at that's in front of me? How do I look at the health? Is this breakwater even the right thing, or is it too big? Fences, I guess we need to making sure that what is in front of them is accurate. Because if I'm opining on something and I'm talking about minimally necessary.
But they're not going to be opining on what's minimally
Well, what
necessary.
can they,
That's not their role.
I'm really I'm a little confused.
They can opine on, I don't think a pier should be here at all. They could say, no pier here. I don't think it's appropriate for our parks in the community in this location
But aren't they
that there
opining on
should
it
be a
based upon
pier.
our ordinances? That's what I don't.
No, the standards, not the ordinances, the standards. The stuff that's in this PowerPoint. That's what they're using as their guideposts.
Okay.
David and his people are using that stack of ordinances as their guidepost. You don't have the amateurs, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but you don't have the amateurs trying to interpret something that they have no technical capacity to do so. The standards are approachable. They're written for our commissions, right? I mean, they're written for resident volunteers to apply to requests, but they aren't expected, nor would it be appropriate, at least in my mind, that they would be doing any sort of a technical review or anything that's embedded into our ordinances or codes. They have standards, and that's what they're guided by.
But Chris, item 6 of the applicable standards for zoning, village council and review of zoning, in fact, the advisory bodies or village council, number 6, is that the special use in all other respects conforms to the applicable regulations of this and other village ordinances and codes.
The applicable.
Yeah, so that's the special
And-
use standards. It's not like how much of the percentage is impervious surface.
Applicable regulations of this and other village ordinances and codes.
Yeah, I think you're reading too much into that language.
Well, but this
There's-
is where we're gonna have confusion.
What do you want?
But
I can't understand how the lower commissions could not look at the lakefront ordinances.
They
Yeah.
can look at the
They
lakefront
can look at
ordinances,
them,
but
Bob,
they don't,
but they can't apply them or interpret them or enforce them because they don't have the technical
So
certifications to do so.
So wait, so
what are they?
so let's just walk it through, right? They come in, it has to go to the lower board. So lower boards will give, we don't think there should be a pier or whatever. Ultimately, it's gonna come to us, right? Because if there's a variance that they're requesting or anything from the lake shore, only the village council has the ability to consider that.
But don't you wanna have
Yeah.
the dialogue bubble up?
And I think we will.
You think we will?
Well, we have on One Winnetka. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about, when we were both at chair, right? 4 stories, 5 stories, right? There was a lot of discussion that we didn't have the technical ability to necessarily make the decisions. But staff would put together the proposals or kind of analyze in the staff report the aspects of the project, whether it complied with our standards or not, and we would talk about it at a policy sort of level. I think that's what we're talking about, right?
But this is so different now, because we're talking about, if I'm on those committees, I'm trying to look at this and say, I've heard about these other things that people are doing that's more state-of-the-art, or if I don't know until somebody with a lot more expertise than I, like a coastal engineer, has said, this is what is the best practice for Winnetka, based on what we have out in the lake and what's going on, and the wave action and the littoral sand drift. I don't know how they opine. I mean, I
Well-
understand they don't want to go on, the height or the technical aspects of it, but I just think there's so many other elements of those committees. Otherwise, they're kind of,
Yeah,
I'm
but
not
it's
sure how
really
they give a robust.
inappropriate for us to hire experts. I mean, it's
No, I know we
ultimately.
don't do that. I think you said it's supposed to be coming to us.
Yes.
That we're expecting it before we look at an application, that that work has been done. Am I looking at that right, Rob?
They have to submit all
No.
these reports.
Let me explain to you how it
Okay.
works, because this is what I do for a living, okay? You start out with a ragged set of drawings, something that creates a mood, tells a story, okay? You don't pay your architect $500,000 to design your building day one when you still haven't got your zoning entitlements, because if you don't get your zoning entitlements, then all the money is wasted, and you've wasted a lot of time, effort, et cetera, moving a project forward that isn't going to pass entitlements, right?
Well, I just want to say, to not cause people to be concerned, what we're saying is you'll have your concept plan with elevations. They
Oh.
won't have the detail of construction drawings because the design may change.
Right.
They're not going to spend money doing construction documents if, there's a discussion about whether there's a pier or the size of the sidewalk. So
Excuse
it's
me.
going to be conceptual, not ragged.
Well, it is ragged. It's ragged from a professional sense because you couldn't build with them.
No, of course not.
And
But
so the
it's
idea is what you do is you
Right.
bring forth the concept, the ideas, you develop it as much as necessary to clear these preliminary entitlement hurdles. Then, once you pass, you go back, you get your engineers involved who are now doing all of their technical calculations. You have your architect involved who's finishing technical details, is how things connect and how big the floor joists have to be and all that good stuff. But all that money and all that effort and all that design work occurs after the fundamental concept has been approved or disapproved. And I think it would be inappropriate, and I'm speaking for all the projects I've done, for a municipality to ask me for a completely vetted set of design documents just to get entitlements.
I get it. I guess I'm not looking for that,
So the
Chris.
whole process, and I'm not saying anybody's looking for anything, but the
Yeah.
whole process is iterative. You start out at this conceptual level, and as the questions get asked and the answers get answered, that expands the scope, it expands the understanding of the project, so that when you finally get through this process, you're able to handle that big batch of comments, questions, approvals, conditions, over to your architects and engineers who then go ahead and design the building.
Yeah.
So we can't expect to have a rock wall design to the point where anybody can say anything other than it's big or it's not big. We won't see all the technical data. We won't see sand drifts or anything like this until it comes time and they have approval to actually submit for a building permit.
But I will say, one of the things that I like about, the lower boards is, and you're on one now, is that when it comes to the Plan Commission, you could say, hey, we're hearing about what they're doing up at that Illinois State Park. And
Yep.
maybe, the islands are better. Like, have you thought about that? I mean, that's certainly something that if they're going to come and show a pier and we think that there's something else something that the lower board, and then the public, those are all public hearings, that the members of the public can come and suggest comments as well.
Oh.
I mean,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. No, I'm with you. I
Yeah.
think that makes sense.
Now,
I guess,
let me just go one step
Yeah,
further,
go
because
ahead.
it's in my head, and you know how I forget shit after it pops out. But Bob, you had mentioned this whole confusion about which board is looking at what. This is a perfect example. I don't know anything about your project, Shannon, so I'm just gonna make some stuff up, because I am not looking at the project until it shows up on this desk for our review.
right.
But let's say they want to put some stairs in that are beyond what our code currently allows, okay? So the plan commission would be looking at the stairs in a general sense. Our code allows 5-foot stairs, and these are 10-foot stairs. And they can look at that and determine from their standards whether this is something that is acceptable or not acceptable, based on the standards, not based on the technical thing. Now, how it gets stuck to the cliff, and how it gets poked into the ground, those are all the technical things. And what gets planted around it, that all comes at the permit stage, which is way after the time when they've actually received approval to move forward. But that's why there's that crossover, because a lot of the structures and the pieces have an aesthetic and a functional value that needs to be considered, but not a technical value.
Understood. Yeah, I guess where I see a potential source of disconnect or confusion between what's going on below and when it gets up here is when you're trying to meet the standard that the zoning board has, for instance, that the public health, safety, comfort, morals, and welfare of the inhabitants of the village will not be otherwise impaired. The health, safety, and welfare is a core element of those lakefront ordinances. And we talked about that at length. Safety, police and fire access, where's the safety there? So to not discuss the public health, welfare, and safety in that context seems to me to be potentially sort of like two different standards. I'd like to have them look at that as it relates to what we might talk about.
Well, but of course, those are all health, safety, and what was the other one?
Welfare.
Welfare.
but they
Morals.
do talk.
Morals.
Morals.
Those are all very subject. I mean,
No
they're very
alcohol at the
subjective,
beach.
though,
Well,
right?
not in
And
our
that's why you have a
ordinances.
committee,
in our
not one
ordinances,
person.
They're not subjective.
But in the standards.
But in the standards
Broad.
in the standards that the committees are charged with assessing, they are.
Okay, well, I'm just saying,
And I don't
there's a
think.
potential here that what they discuss and deliberate on at length may be a complete disconnect from
Well, we're gonna-
what is
yeah.
in our ordinances that we will review. So,
Well, we'll still be reviewing it on, I think Tina said, a policy level, obviously with a much finer grain. But we still aren't gonna be sitting here understanding how many tons of rock are necessary to stop the waves from crashing
But-
in. That's not gonna be part of council. We're gonna rely on our technical experts to determine that if we end up approving the project.
well, in part, my sympathy is going out to the Park District because I'm hoping they don't go through this full process and have different conclusions and different standards on the same issue. So public health, welfare, and safety is a benchmark here.
I can tell you what I do on every single project I've developed. 30, 40 of them. I live with village staff during my entitlements because I want to know what's coming down the pipe on whether they decided to stick fire sprinklers in my brand-new building or not. I am there a lot, and my architect is there a lot during entitlements because they need to understand all the technical aspects to make sure whatever design they're proposing can actually get built. So there is this informing, and I would suggest very strongly that the Park District and, here's Red Barn talking to the folks over at Baird right from the beginning, because wait until after this whole shooting match is done and then finding out something doesn't
That's-
work, it'd be a real disappointment.
That's
Well-
my concern there, right there.
Yeah.
Shannon's listening.
She's not.
So the iterative process is occurring now. There's comments going back to say, okay, this is what you need for entitlement. And by the way, as you get to the goal line of entitlement, there's going to be a set of standards that you're gonna need to meet in order to hit what's minimally required in the construction in the lake, what's minimally necessary. at the permitting stage. Okay?
But you're saying that that level of specificity that will help guide us and potentially the lower boards isn't due until,
No, I'm not saying it's
I
not
guess it's-
due.
They have to make a reasonable representation
Yeah,
of what they expect.
right.
Right.
I mean, they can't show us this much poking out of the water and then come back with a building
Right,
permit that's
right.
got this much out
Yeah,
of the
Right.
water.
yeah.
They're gonna have to have a
Well, it's
certain
a
amount.
major change
they're gonna
under
have to-
these standards,
They're-
right?
The
and it
applicant's
puts
gonna have
them
to have a
square
certain amount
one.
invested in order to make sure that the application is complete for complete zoning review,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's quite a bit to that.
Right.
But then the finer points come after zoning entitlement in terms of permit approval. And if there's anything there that is a disconnect, then they've got to go back and review it in terms of it, whether it's a significant
So
change or
Rob,
not.
the
It's an
reviews-
iterative process for
The
sure.
staff reviews that are going on right now,
Mhm.
would that cover sort of those lakefront ordinance standards? So it's not going, it's going to the plan commission and zoning board, in a sense, with those already approved, if you will, in a soft way, not approved.
No,
No,
there's an
not-
analysis. So when something comes to the plan commission or the ZBA, there's a staff kind of analysis of the plan. There's no it's just,
But they've reviewed sort of,
Yes.
these standards that are part of our.
Yes.
No. It's not, no, no, I know what Bob is asking, and it's not what you're answering.
no, it's
Not
not
to
the
that level.
technical, like, is it, 8 feet or whatever, but it talks about it in the broad sense so that the lower boards can have these kind of discussions
Yeah.
about whether it's, consistent with
Is it
the.
minimally
What you
necessary
just,
covered?
that's exactly
No,
what my
but
No,
That's
question
not a
because
standard.
staff,
I know, but the staff is reviewing, so the
No.
staff is not.
that's a
reviewing
subjective decision for
What
city
David is doing
council.
right now is he's looking, and
Yeah. Yeah.
this is in my head, so it might not be 100% right, but it's how I see it, okay? David gets the drawings in, he goes, up, stairs in the bluff, and they're bigger than 5 feet. Exception. Not, how's it attached to the bluff, or how are the foundations sunk, or whatever. It's just, I got a stairwell, it's in the bluff, we have regulations about that, and it's bigger than the regulations. Flag it, now it becomes a discussion at the advisory boards for the piece itself, whether it should be 10 feet or 5 feet.
And it notes
But
that it
but
would
that's as
have
far
to
as
get
it
an
goes.
exception or whatever.
Right.
But it is,
And
but-
so,
but based on,
and
hold on a
so-
sec, David, but based on what you just read about what the zoning and what those other boards are expected to opine on, there still remains a disconnect. I mean, I think I think doing this level of detail and work speaks to the fact this is something that none of us have ever really dealt with before at this level.
I
I
disagree
disagree.
totally.
I mean, we
Well,
dealt
this
with
is
very
just-
specific
but we're dealing with-
questions.
but we're
This is
dealing
just
on
an
one
entitlement
Winnetka.
situation.
It's not. You're dealing with lakefront regulations.
It doesn't
You're dealing with
matter.
coastal
Right.
engineers. You're dealing with a lot of stuff that you don't get at one Winnetka. It isn't whether it's 4 or 5 stories tall, guys. This is
No, but
this is dealing with.
we've done what and structural engineers, that level of technical detail has occurred with any number of projects in the past. David, you were gonna say something before the
Yeah, please,
discussion.
go ahead.
takes
so there's the review, and depending upon how conceptually the documents are, the review by the engineers may be something like insufficient evidence or information at this time presented to show compliance with this.
Yeah.
That will need to be demonstrated at permit. So that people are put on notice. I can't tell from your plans whether this complies or not, but it is a permit requirement. You'll have to demonstrate that. Some applicants will submit much more detail than what Chris is talking about. Some applicants, they submit their plans and it's like, you can't build that because you need a variation. And so then we have to go through the variation process.
And they've spent all the
So
money.
the level of plans you're going to see are going to be more than conceptual. As we've been moving along, they have worked on some information, but it's still not going to be, yes, it meets minimally, it's minimally what's necessary. This is what, it may be a study, the littoral drift study that they still need to submit to determine is that what's minimally necessary. but there will be elevations of the improvements. And from a special use perspective, they can, based on those criteria, does this meet those standards at that height, at that length for this area of the community?
And there's public hearings, right? So people who think it's not minimally necessary will come out and give their opinion. And then there'll be people from the community who'll say, well, you know, my daughter's in a wheelchair and we need this, right? And that's gonna be the information that comes up for us to make the hard choices and the decision at the end,
I would
right?
say this, though, if I were in the Park District shoes on this, I would not want to go through the process, go through all the commissions, go through the council, get approval, and then have, at the end, on the permitting, the village engineer say that is beyond what's minimally necessary at that point. So you've gone through the whole process, you get to the end, and the engineer says, that's not what's minimally necessary. It's got to be very different than what you have.
And that's what
But
happened
it-
with Ishbia.
Well,
Exactly.
Well-
Is it the village
No, not
engineer
well, it's
who makes that,
exactly.
or is it us that
That's
says that?
exactly what happened
I think
with
it's
Ishbia.
us in the end.
How is that what's
In the
in the
matrix, you'll see it's a.
He submitted his drawings and they
Yeah,
were
what-
not.
For the-
The village, the lakefront regulations that the village council approved specifically made it an administrative approval that the village council is not approving, and so it's the village engineer, subject to an appeal, that decides whether something is minimally necessary under the ordinance.
So-
That's our process.
But Peter,
That's a-
they're gonna go through the whole process,
That's their risk.
and I guess that's, okay.
That is,
But-
and that is what happened with Mr. Ishbia. He reduced his project on the lakefront on the lakeshore in response to the village engineer's comments.
That-
Materially.
And that gets lost, I think. A lot of people don't realize that, right?
Well, because there's still a rock wall there and people are disappointed that the wall survived at all. But that's a different story altogether. And much to your point, Bob, what I said earlier, if the Park District is in regular communication with our professionals, that shouldn't be an issue. Because they should be thinking about it now. Because they're gonna have to deal with it sooner or later if it moves forward. And I think it would be incumbent on the consultants over there to be talking with Baird.
I hope so.
If they haven't, they should be.
Okay.
I mean, it's that balancing, right? Enough information to get it through to the process where you're not wasting your money and your time. But at the same time, have enough, you don't want all those absolutely final studies because the plan could change, right? I mean, it's just a balancing. They have to make that decision as the
Okay.
project applicant.
Well, usually though, when we hear from the lower boards, it's pretty, we're pretty close. This may be a case where we're not even in the same ballpark if they are not looking at some of the same stuff we are. Is that right?
I
I
wouldn't
be
speculate.
predictive.
I wouldn't be
No,
predictive.
I'm not at
'cause
all. I hope we're not. I hope they raise everything. They're very thoughtful people, and they'll hopefully figure it out and ask the questions.
Well, for the record, I can think of 5 different cases that came from ZBA as a recommendation of denial that village board decided to approve, so I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. No, I appreciate the work you guys are doing on this to try and clarify it, because I think it's gonna help the lower board, it's gonna help us, and
It's really complicated stuff.
it is, I agree. Go through the whole process. I agree.
So, are we good with this? We all feel a little
I
bit more
think this is really
smarter?
nice to have.
I do, I
Is
agree.
this- is
I'm
this-
keeping this one, actually. Thank you, David.
Don't you keep everything?
Yeah, I've got a third floor where
I have
where it
a
just all
closet
goes.
full of village binders. But this will go up on the website? Is this up on the website if people want to access this slide?
We can add it to the agenda packet.
Yeah, and put it, what's that?
You were giving me grief about holding
No,
on
I
to
know,
stuff?
I know.
Can you read that?
No, I know. But I think maybe if, for those, because we know there's a lot of people watching and there's a lot of people who want to, help understanding this, I think that would be helpful, having that on the website.
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that no permits can be issued until zoning entitlement has been given, right? So
Right.
that was one of the public comments that we had received, was this worry about permits being issued. That's not going to happen until zoning is completed. The special use process has to be completed in full and
Which has
received.
to come through the village council.
It would,
ultimately.
as the matrix noted, village
Yeah.
council has final authority,
Yeah.
then you go to permitting.
I get it. Thank you for putting this together.
Good job. Does anybody out there want to add anything? No? Shan, you don't want to share your thoughts tonight with us? You're more than welcome to come up.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We're here every Tuesday night. Okay. I lost myself. I'm good. Okay. Last item this evening is closed session. I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining, security procedures, and pending litigation pursuant to sections 2C2, 2C8, and 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act. Under the motion, when we adjourn the closed session, this meeting will automatically and immediately adjourn without the conduct of any further business or comments. May I have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Apatow?
Yes.
Trustee Orsick?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you.